got taken.
Oh man.
All right.
Hi. Well, welcome to the State of the Game panel here, hosted by Fable42, Chris Solo. We're very thankful for Chris and his willingness to host this panel. Also, big shout out to Cameron and the D&D Coalition for connecting me with everybody here in some way, shape, or form. Just really appreciate everybody taking some time out of their week. I'm sure we all have a little bit of extra time, but anyway, taking some time out of their week to engage and talk about what's happening in tabletop role-playing right now when we aren't able to actually physically sit around a table with other people. I also want to thank all of our panelists for, again, taking some time. We're going to lead in with introductions. So I'm going to, as we all do in our games, I'm going to roll a d6, and you all are listed, and we're going to start there and see who goes first. Number one. So Chris Solo, would you please introduce yourself real quick? And maybe just give us the state where you live, and yeah, we'll just go with that.
Sure.
So.
I'm Chris Solo. I run the Fabled42 network and DM several Ukador shows. Big shout out to all the other content creators and people out there. I'm very excited to get to meet you all and have this conversation. I currently live in Oregon. The state of the game has been on my mind for quite some time. So this is awesome opportunity. Thank you for having me.
Anthony, you're up next.
I muted my microphone just in case if my kids go crazy. You don't want that. You don't want that wily background noise. Okay. I do a podcast with my friend Josh called Investigation Check, where we talk about the culture and psychology of D&D. From Tampa, Florida, also known as the Wild West during the COVID season. You may have seen memes about us. They're all true. What else? What else am I supposed to say?
Oh, whatever. That's great.
That's it. That's great. I did good.
That's wonderful.
Go, guys.
You did wonderful. Thank you. Brianna, you're up next.
Hi, I'm Brianna. You can find me on Instagram at Brianna Flame. I primarily work on Instagram with tabletop photography, and I'm a streamer on actually a couple of Chris's Fable42 shows, as well as Vorpal Board River. And I also live in Oregon.
Looks like Hobbiton, but call it Oregon if you want.
That's a great background. Cameron?
Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Cameron Atkinson. I run the D&D Coalition. I'm from Tampa, Florida. I actually live in Anthony's backyard. I'm in a really elaborate tent right now. But don't tell him, because I haven't paid him rent in a few months. Happy to be here. I play a couple games with Chris Solo, also with Lady Tiefling from time to time, and really happy to be with you guys.
Thanks, Cameron. Logan?
Logan Hanley. I run a small DM kind of tip hotline type of Instagram called DM Screening. I also play in a couple of Chris Solo's games, The Adventures in Middle-earth, where I also play with Bree. And I'll be running the Cantor Chronicles starting in May.
Awesome. Thanks, Logan. Jason?
Hey, I'm Jason from Critical Dice, and I run a Instagram community thing at Critical Dice, and I also stream the Fables of Ukador on Fable42 on the first Sunday of the month, and play with a lot of the same people who are here, and various other things. And occasionally I play a very weird Frenchman with a terrible accent on Origins of Ukador as well.
It's a fantastic accent.
And I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We're known for Bugs Bunny getting lost and blue meth.
Nice. That makes sense. Well, I'm Robert Tomko. You can find me on Instagram. I'm Dad the DM. There's underscores between all the words. I have been playing games for a couple of years, and I have a confession to make to everybody here, and I probably should have said this. Logan knows this, and he didn't say it, but I'm a Pathfinder guy. I've played D&D and Adventures in Middle-earth, but I've run those games, I should say. I've never actually played a full campaign in D&D before. So I am the wild card here, and that's also why I've asked myself to be the moderator, so I don't muddy up the waters. So if you guys want to kick me off or leave now, please feel free to.
Yeah, we're all like, oh, we're done. See ya. Yeah.
Right, I know.
I just think
I'm
we
so
need
sorry.
to change that. Someone run this guy through a game.
Oh my gosh. Well, anyway, so to get started here, what I really wanted to do is examine some of the history, some of the recent history around the game, in hopes that we can understand better where we are, and then where potentially this game is going to go in the middle of this climate. So, Cameron, I have the first questions for you, and then I'll ask you to respond, and then we'll open it up to everybody else for a response. But how has the game and the game community changed in the last 5 years?
In the last 5 years, I feel like, especially with Critical Role, I'd be amiss if I didn't mention them, because they're what I personally think is largely responsible for the popularity recently in the past few years of D&D. But I mean, other huge things, like you said, you're a Pathfinder guy. Well, Pathfinder also kind of paved the way for organized play. Where you can just pop in a game shop and kind of have like your own Pokemon deck setup and go play at another table that has like a record log and has really nice organization to it. And I think things like that and Adventures League and opening it up to, just making it more public so you can kind of pop in and do like a pickup game here and there. I think those things are massive for the community, and also just the access to information. It's huge.
Yeah, I would agree on all fronts. I think just the explosiveness, it seems like it came in waves a little bit, where Magic the Gathering was picking up steam like 2015. And then we saw board games explode for 2 years, right? 2016, 2017. And then it seemed like in a very natural curve, tabletop games kind of rode the wave in behind it. And I followed that progression and started with Adventures in Middle Earth a couple of years back, running those games. And that's actually how I met Logan, oddly enough. We started playing together. So anybody else, comments or reflections on how gaming has changed and grown in the last 5 years?
I can touch on that, I guess, a little bit, but it's an interesting perspective. People may not realize it or not, but I've only been playing D&D 5th edition for 2 years when we started this stream. I actually took a 20-year break from D&D. Like the last time I played, I think, was when 2nd edition came out, like when I was in junior high. It was an interesting thing. But, I mean, to touch on what Cameron was talking about, like the Critical Role boom helped 5th edition. Like 5th edition, I think, as an edition, I don't know much about the other editions, but I know that they're more complex. But 5th edition makes it a little bit easier, and it's not as intimidating to learn the game, to play the game. And with the boom of online streaming, like what we do, it helps you learn. It makes you, like streams like ours or other people's or Critical Roles, like you watch the stream and you're like, wow, this game is really fun, and it's not that hard to play. Like that in itself kind of just builds the community, and that's why I think it's grown. I mean, Critical Role definitely helped, but you can look at those analytics. Like Critical Role is awesome on Thursdays, but any other show that Critical Role has is still big, but it's not as big as Thursday's show. Or if you have like Mercer who guest stars on other streams, you don't see those numbers. So it's the community that Critical Role built for Thursday night that works for Thursday night. But I think the game as a whole is just kind of the technology of it or whatever has brought the views and the awareness that the game is not like hiding in your mom's basement and being ashamed that you play D&D, you know?
I think, if you don't mind me actually piggybacking off of that, is that social media, and I think all of us can probably agree on this, has also really helped. I know Critical Role specifically is really interactive with their fan base, saying we want to see your fan art, your cosplays, pretty much any type of creative medium they encourage. And so people who may not necessarily have the opportunity, like in their hometown, to be able to put a group together can still participate in some way.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've similar to Solo been only playing for about 3 years now, and if it wasn't for Critical Role and me finding Critical Role in the beginning, and then like Cameron has said and like Solo has said, kind of paving the way, I don't think I would have ended up. I don't think I would have ended up, dungeon mastering, let alone playing. It definitely opened the door for me to see, oh, this is really fun. This looks really cool. Let me try it now. And since then, I've been able to introduce it to a ton of people. Not only, other people our age, but my students as well.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great. So let's move forward and see how. I'm going to ask Chris to respond first to this next question. How has technology helped the advancement of D&D and made it maybe more accessible in the community? I think you've already touched on some of that.
Yeah, I was starting to talk with that. So yeah, I mean, technology in itself, like, is I'm gonna be nice. Technology in itself. So programs like Roll20, that you don't necessarily need the video option. You have the audio options. They have all the stats and the player things. So everything at your fingertips. You're able to. It makes it easier. Makes it accessible, especially in a time like now. And we use Vorpal board, which essentially is like a very similar platform, but it's on steroids. It's so much more advanced. It's so much better to play remotely. You have digital dice. You have actual video and audio that you can see and see very clearly. It's even equal to, if not better than Zoom, what we're using right now. And Zoom features for maps and all those things. So the technology keeps evolving. Even the evolution of D&D Beyond. D&D Beyond, when I first made my first character, like, one of my bosses a few years back that said, "Hey, let's go play D&D," and I didn't even know D&D was a thing anymore. I'm like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" And we'd made paper character sheets. I didn't have a player's handbook. He didn't give me any of the rules. It was kind of hard for me to understand why I'm getting all these things. Later that night, I went and did some research and found D&D Beyond and built that same character, and it was so easy because it tells you, oh, you're a human, you get this, this, and this. You're this class. It explains what each thing is, and it's really easy to digest that. So I think those technical advances, A, to be able to play with friends anywhere, B, to be able to watch other people play or listen to other people play D&D, and then the actual just digestion of learning how to play D&D with D&D Beyond and other apps like that, I think is really revolutionary. Made it just so accessible.
I think it's interesting, this comment of technology. Obviously, I think all of us are thinking about technology in terms of D&D more than we ever have in the past, obviously, because whether you prefer to sit at a physical table with your friends or not, it's not the immediate option anymore. Coincidentally, I had a long call with 3 of my players this morning, and we were talking about, do we keep, because I live in Florida, so we have the option to still meet. We're not on shelter in place or whatever. We can still meet in groups of 10 or less. So I was asking them, do we do that? Do we not? What do you guys want to do? And the conversation evolved of us sort of weighing the pros and cons. And something I realized that I think is really important for a lot of maybe the thinking of D&D during COVID-19 is an error that I was making was, how do I create the technology driven D&D experience and make it as similar as possible to the physical in-person D&D experience? But I think that's a mistake. I think if you constantly say, how can I get on Zoom or Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds or whatever and have it come as close as I can and go into the game with that expectation, I think you'll be disappointed every single game. I think what we need to do as players, and especially DMs leading our players, is to say, this is a different platform, it's a different medium, and we need to go in with different expectations and figure out different metrics for what's a success or what's a victory for the game. Because some things are going to be worse. A lot of things are going to be worse. I don't think anything will ever take the place of sitting across the table with your friends. But in some ways, I think being online could maybe be better. And I think it's up to us to figure out what those things are.
Anthony, to add to that, so we play with in Ukador, the Ukador stream. We use Vorpal board, with I think you mentioned. And it's really cool because you said that we need to create a new expectation for virtual gaming. And I think that Vorpal board really does, even in its early stages. I think it captures the element, because you can have, your tabletop train that you set up, or you might be a DM who spends hours and hours or a bunch of money on crafting this stuff. And you still get to utilize that in a unique way. And I think that kind of allows people to facilitate that type of gameplay that's unique in its own fashion.
Yeah, that's really good.
So
No, I think that's really insightful. Go ahead.
Yeah, so just to touch on it from a different perspective. So if anybody who's a longtime fan of the Realms of Ukador, which is my Wednesday stream, we started the first year and 3 months in the same room in a living room studio, and because of housing conditions and prices in San Francisco and things like that, like I moved and another player moved. So we took our home game, a game that we were really used to playing in the same studio, and it was a very similar setup to like Critical Role, where it's, you know, 2 sides of the table, 3 cameras, all that jazz. It was a really fun experience to all of a sudden being remote. And we started with Zoom, and then we went to Lightstream, and then eventually, you know, things came to be that we came to Vorpal. It's never going to be the same as in the same room. But Vorpal board, we're going to keep touching on that. Vorpal board, definitely. Vorpal board, what's the other new one that's coming out? Tailspire, which is like that 3D rendering dungeon model thing, which is awesome. It'll never be the same as having those interpersonal connections with a human being that's next to you or across from you. Like, I'm still trying to create that organically, even though we're all a bunch of talking heads. But there are programs out there, technology out there, that will help at least a little bit get you in that same, where you feel like you know the person that's right next to you.
Yeah, I think
That's really good.
I think too, like, to touch off what Cameron said and Chris, is that you're right. It's not going to be the same, but that doesn't mean it's worse.
No.
Same is not a, you know, logical equivalent. It just means that it's different.
Yeah.
And there are some things that you can do with technology, specifically streaming, that you couldn't do in other ways. And like 3 things come to my mind right away. One is when I'm playing online like this, just like now, I can see everyone's face pretty much simultaneously.
Yeah.
And so if I'm DMing something, I can see everyone's reaction to something pretty much in real time.
Yeah.
And right away, instead of having to look around the table and check on people. And if someone's playing with their phone, I can tell right away, because people don't typically stare at their lap and smile.
Well.
Chris feels attacked. And then also on top of that too, you get a chance to, I lost one of my points. You get a chance to basically run surprises that you couldn't run otherwise. So I had my local home game obviously has transitioned to online, and we've only gotten a chance to play one during this whole time, mostly due to schedule and craziness. But in my game, I have this one guy who's a friend in real life to a lot of my players, and he wanted to play a few months back for one of my players' birthday. And so I had him come in, and I had him like, oh, you're gonna be this cool NPC, but I'm gonna let you drive him. And he shows up in this adventure, and everyone thought he was super cool because I made him really cool and OP and everything. And then I knew months later I was gonna have that character come back. And so we logged into Vorpal board, we played, and I hid his window off on the side. And then when it came time for the big reveal, I texted him, and he just turned on his camera, and all of a sudden he just shows up, and people were losing their minds, which is what I wanted to happen. And he had been listening the entire time and knew what was going on. And then we got to play forward with that. And I think that alone was everyone's like favorite moment from that online experience, because I was kind of worried, how's this going to work? Because I've been planning this for months, and it ended up being actually easier to facilitate because we were online.
Yeah, I think the inclusion of people is easier now than probably ever before. I DM a game, and then I play in a game. And the game that I play in, we had a friend of ours moved to California, and so we had to, say goodbye to his character. But I was texting him last week, and I said, dude, we're playing online now. Do you want to jump in? And he's like, I'm in. And so everybody, same experience. Everybody was losing their mind, like, oh my God, Sombrine is coming back. Like, that's going to be so amazing. And so I think like collecting maybe old players and bringing people back into the fold that it was hard because of proximity is probably a really beautiful experience that we now get to have because of, technology, remote play.
Yeah, and that was, I remember my other point, sorry. When we did the meat grinder here during GaryCon, that originally was supposed to be just a private game that a bunch of us were going to play while we were at an Airbnb at GaryCon. And it was just going to be us being, riotous and making fun of each other, waiting for our turns to pop in. But it actually ran really, really smooth and was a lot of fun because we could have people jump in, jump out, jump in, jump out, and cycle all the way through. So that was my other point.
Well, for those of us who had working internet, it went really smooth, but others not.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
Jason, I want to add in that you were able to come up with a creative way to kind of capture that lightning in a bottle moment that every DM, no matter who they are, how many sessions they've played, they're always trying to capture that. And I think it's our responsibility as dungeon masters to innovate, to improvise, and figure out how we can do that. And you achieved that. So that's really freaking cool.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, man.
Any other last thoughts on this one before we move into the next block? All right, that was great. So that is a good examination of the past and kind of even how the technology has moved us into the present in dealing with some of this. So I think Anthony mentioned that you're not quite in the shelter-in-place orders and where you're at. I know I'm in Philadelphia and we have been for several weeks. Logan's up the street from me here. So I think it's worth acknowledging here just a minute that this current climate where we are right now has had a pretty significant impact, not only on the game, but on us as human beings as well. There's an element of mental, emotional, physical strain that kind of is present where it wasn't before. For me, I'm a father of 4, I'm married. We're going to tick 15 years this year, believe it or not. And so, there's thinking about like every time my wife goes out and shops, like that could be, we could find out in 2 weeks if she's sick or if I bring it home when I'm out, if my kids get sick. Like there is a significant weightiness to this season. I don't want to dwell on that too much, but I think that helps us inform maybe how we run our games, how our players are coming to the table, what they're experiencing in real life. And so it just thinking through that, maybe having that in the background. Logan, I want to pitch this one to you first. How has this reality shaped the state of the game for you as a DM and maybe for the people that you play with? I know you, and just as a caveat, I believe you run at least 1 or 2 live games and you play in 1 or 2 live games around the city. So go ahead.
Yeah. So, you obviously know our game. We are now doing remotely on Roll20. But the one thing as a dungeon master that's really interesting, and I think everybody else has brought up good points on the last question, is that you really have to be like innovative and you really have to find new ways to create meaningful moments in a game now that we're online. I have 2 players in the game that I play in my apartment who are essential workers. So they're constantly in the thick of it. And, I'm constantly making sure, every couple of days I check in with them, seeing how they're doing mental health wise, seeing, how they're holding up, if they've gotten, sick or anything like that. But it's really different to go from playing, sitting around the table with everybody to now we're all, on the screen. As a dungeon master, it's been fun. I think it's definitely a situation is detrimental, and it's kind of like it's not fun to be in the situation we're in, but it's fun to find new ways to get everybody excited to come to the table, even if we're playing on Skype or Vorpal board or Roll20, because you have those players like my barbarian who will sit there through the first 20 minutes of a game and be bored out of his mind. But the second I bring out the battle map, that I have a bunch of 2D terrain that I bring out, and he sees all that, his face lights up and he's ready to go. And it's really cool. The only thing I miss personally is the game I run at the school that I work at. Since we've gotten our stay-at-home order here in Pennsylvania, I haven't really had any contact with any of my students that played in those games, and I had maybe about 20-ish kids playing in 3 or 4 different tables, and that's one thing I miss is just after school on a Friday having 20 kids in there playing D&D and watching them go on adventures and have fun. And I wish I could do something like Roll20 with them, but that's the difficult part. But I think as a whole, just being able to adapt and overcome the challenges and watching my players overcome the change of sitting at a table to now being online is really cool and rewarding.
I'm going to jump in and actually just answer a piece real quick. Cam, you can go right next. But when we played our Pathfinder game last week, Friday night, and just in the messages that were going around, even everybody was excited just to see the faces of their players. So I mean, most of us hadn't been outside of our house, and I believe all of us are still working to some capacity or another. But
Hmm.
just the idea of being able to see each other, that sparked a lot of joy in an otherwise pretty down time. So I just wanted to pitch that in from my perspective. Go ahead, Cam.
No, I was just gonna say, I feel like this has all kind of really put things in perspective and made us realize and appreciate how small the world is, especially with technology. You know, you got these friends you haven't talked to in months that, you know, you went to high school with or you went to college with, whatever. And you're excited every once in a while when you talk to them. Then you have people that live, you know, 5 minutes away from you that are in your home group that you see every week. And then, you know, you're Skyping in with them. And it kind of puts in perspective that, like, hold on a second, if I can Skype my friend that lives right down the road, why can't I Skype my mom, my grandma, my aunt, or, you know, whoever? So it's kind of, this whole thing has really put things into perspective, I think, for a lot of people.
I agree.
Yeah, this is a little bit of a tangent from what Logan said, but I think it's significant enough that it needs to be said again. Logan just mentioned checking in with his players, and then he said, you know, even mental health wise. I think in D&D we can have this strange culture at our tables where it's like we're a community when we're sitting around the table, but then, you know, between sessions or something like that, we could easily forget about each other. Or maybe you could even say, I care about your character, but maybe not about the player, which is a gross, I think, misunderstanding of what the community is that's being created at the table. And so I want to reiterate again what Logan said. Like, we, more than ever now, and especially as DMs, checking in with your players, seeing how they're doing. Don't just love the character, love the player, and just make sure that everybody is healthy and good. And what can you do to encourage and bring a little light and happiness and joy, creativity back into, you know, into your players' lives, even between sessions. So I just think that needs to be said one more time.
Preach.
Oh, that's really good. Come on. All right, well, let's go ahead. We'll pivot to the next question. So, Brianna, this one, I'm going to pitch it to you. How do you see the current climate that we're in right now reshaping the culture of the game going forward? So we talked about the past, a little bit of where we are presently, but what elements of this are going to reshape us going forward?
So I think a really big part of that is because we're having to be in this unique situation where we're adapting as players, as dungeon masters, just as groups as a whole in a community, that I'm personally hoping that the accessibility that we're focusing on right now continues and improves in the future. Because, I mean, unfortunately, who knows if we're going to be stuck in this for a long time, or if we come across this type of situation again, or even if it's just players that happen to move to a different location. So I know a couple of you guys have already touched base on that a little bit, of knowing that just because your circumstances change does not mean your entire game has to. There can be constants for it, regardless of the circumstances.
That's really good. I agree. You know, and just talking about the longevity of it, in my 9 to 5, I work with startup nonprofits and small businesses, and one of the things that we focus on is gatherings of people. We help start churches all over the world, and right now, church is meeting anywhere for any length of time. And some of the realities that we're dealing with is those even small gatherings won't be able to occur again potentially until next year. And so we're looking at a season of, if the blizzard was when everything first hit, there's a winter and perhaps even an ice age that comes in behind this. And so I think just in your comment in passing saying, we don't know how long this is going to last, I think that is a real reality, that getting back to the kitchen table game, which I love, may not happen for a while. And it's certainly not safe for people to come back to if they're immunocompromised, which actually one of our players is. So any other thoughts on how this is reshaping the culture?
I mean, yeah, kind of just piggybacking off of what you guys said, it's definitely, like, I know for me, schools are closed in the state of Pennsylvania for the remainder of the school year. Some of the colleges have even considered going as far as 2021. But it's, you know, I still have had a couple players or a couple of the dungeon masters who said, hey, can you send me the stats for this monster, or can you do, you know, can you look up something like this for me? I'm playing with my players online, how, you know, but I don't know what I'm looking into, and having that, you know, kind of interaction with your players, with your dungeon masters, it's really positive. As long, just keep checking in and make sure everybody's kind of on the same page.
Yeah, I think this is um, helping people to understand how much we need community and how much we need each other. And you see all the funny memes about how extroverts are crawling up the walls and introverts are like, this is fine, But even after a certain point, you realize I miss human interaction. I miss seeing other people's faces. And all these things. And so I think people are realizing, like, who maybe have never thought about gaming online or never thought about watching a stream, and they're realizing, oh, this actually is in some way filling that kind of void in my heart and in my psyche, because I just need to see humans interact with each other. I need someone to talk to. I need to hang out with people. I know that Anthony and I we're hanging out more online than we ever have before. I think like just about every other day we're getting on House Party or something and just saying dumb stuff to each other, so yeah, I think that's true, but yeah.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people talk about it'll be or no, whatever, how they phrase it. Essentially, a lot of people are waiting for things to get back to normal so we can just leave this season behind. And usually it's about work or something like that. And then a lot of commentary on that idea is essentially that what a waste this season would have been if we don't learn from this time. Like, how do you work remotely? How do you create community when you're not near somebody? How do you foster your life, and how do you stay healthy? And I think this same is true for D&D. So like looking forward, I hope that we don't just see this as like a big pain moment in the like life of D&D and say, I just can't wait for this to be over so we can sit at a table together, but instead say, what are we learning in this time, and how can we take these lessons and the ways that we've pivoted and make our games in the future better,
Yeah, I think I want to stress that point just a little bit. I don't know if there's anything else to tease out there, but I think it's just worth noting that if we aren't learning something about ourselves and about the people who sit at our tables with us in the middle of this season, I think we're missing something. And I mean, this is obviously a tragedy, and so I don't want to try to spin it like it's some kind of moral teaching point or something. The reality is people are losing their lives or losing loved ones, and so I don't want to make light of that. But there is something that we can learn about just the value of human interaction with people that we may not otherwise always agree with. And so I know that'll dovetail into a whole other thing. We maybe don't have to go there, but I think it's maybe just worth highlighting that and bringing that to light. So yeah. Any other thoughts, comments from anybody? All right, let's go ahead and move on. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
One big thing that we work on in my office is self-awareness. And those of you from Anthony, I know you're familiar with the Enneagram. I think I'm saying that right. But basically, it's kind of an evaluation of who you are as a person, and kind of knowing like where you go to when you're stressed out and what you pull from whenever things are going well. But to kind of segue from that, I think this is a great time to work on self-awareness. And a lot of people are like, "Oh, I'm self-aware. I'm doing good. I know my feelings. I got my emotions in check." And the reality, you might have no idea anything about self-awareness. And for me, that's one thing that I've really tried hard to dive into is becoming more self-aware. Because my girlfriend and I, we get to spend a lot of time together, and we've got a dog and whatnot. But at the end of the day, like you gotta also be comfortable sitting in the dark with yourself for a while. And this is the best. There's no better time in history than right now to work on
that. Yeah, I agree. Enneagram is a great tool. I just throw out another one, the emotional intelligence quotient, the EQI. If you guys haven't ever done an EQI, anybody listening, I highly recommend it. It illuminated a lot of, they call it flat spots because they give you a wheel. And so there was a couple flat spots on mine that needed some inflation in some life. So that's really good. Thanks for sharing that, Kim. Anybody else? Great. Well, the next segment, I just want to lead in with a little bit of Doctor Who nerdiness. I'm a huge Doctor Who fan, and I think everybody should be. It's a great show. But one of the things that I believe they started talking about this mostly with the 11th Doctor was this idea of like a fixed point in time. It's a point in time when where this the Doctor was traveling back and forth that he couldn't change it. It was stuck. It was permanent. And sometimes it involved the tragedy of losing one of his companions. I really believe that this is one of those moments in the sense that um, this is going to permanently alter the course of history. Even when all these restrictions are lifted and we're able to go about business as usual, it will never quite be the same. These things create like a marker in our psyche, right? Where we just, what's the next thing? Is there another illness? I don't want to get the flu at all. Those kinds of things. And so I want to just maybe think about how what we're learning about the game and I think we reflected on some of this and how it might not return, life might not return to what it was just 2 months ago. And I think we've done some of that. So my next lead in, and I'm going to ask for Jason, I'm going to ask you to respond to this one. In light of all of that, in light of everything else that we maybe talked about up to this point, what advice would you give someone who is interested in starting out now? And maybe something specific, where can they go to get connected with somebody to play? And maybe just talk them back from running away from it because it feels daunting. So
Yeah,
if you have any advice.
for sure. There's a lot of really good resources to get started, and it depends on the person's familiarity with the game. So if they know someone who already plays, um, talk with that person, have them kind of teach you the rules. That's always been the first and best way to learn D&D, is to have someone come alongside you and kind of show you the ropes. I think we all were taught how to play by someone else. I don't really know of anyone who just picked up the rule book and just ran with it, although that would be an interesting social experiment. But I think beyond that too is when you want to create characters, like, you can go to the Wizards of the Coast website and just download some pre-gens for a variety of levels. You can go to D&D Beyond, where it's free. You can get the basic rules and a really neat little system and program that they can walk you step by step through how to make a character. You can look up rules, you can look up monsters. All those tools are there. You can watch some streams just to get an idea of like the flow of how a game kind of looks and feels if you've never really done it before. And if you're looking for other players to play with, or even a new group where you're going to be the DM, because the world always will need more DMs, is you can probably go to any of the Facebook groups right now out there, either the official one or Dungeons and Dragons Uncensored, which is another big one out there. And you can find people who are looking for people to play with. And they'll have their links for their Zoom or for their Roll20 or for whatever. And there's actually a really great kind of web app called Crawler that's been out for a little less than a year, and it literally is Tinder for D&D players. And you can find other people in your area who are playing, or people who are just looking for a group now, especially to play online. So I think that's probably the easiest way now to get started.
That's awesome. I'm gonna shamelessly plug Jason real quick. Your Instagram account is great, especially for DMs that are kind of figuring out, like, maybe I don't want to run a module, but I need some seed ideas. What's your count up to right now as far as story seeds? I saw 400.
I posted 482 today. Number
It's
482
amazing. So,
today.
Yeah, so if you're running out of ideas or just want to start somewhere, there's 482 great ideas with little pictures and some a good blurb underneath it, right from Jason's Instagram alone.
Yeah, and what's really cool about those is two things. Is that, one, I love taking 3 random ones and trying to put them all together into an idea for a story. Not just take one thing, but take 3 and try to make them work as the beginning, middle, and end of a story. So you're already creating this 3-part story structure. You're already kind of pushing the limits of creativity, because if one's about under the ocean, and another one's about a desert, and another one's about a shopkeeper, you're like, okay, well, how am I going to do all that? Sometimes putting those restrictions on yourself can help you to kind of provoke your creativity into new places. Creative hooks is about a little less than half of them were made by the community. I didn't make them. People will just send me a direct message or an email, and they'll say, "What about this?" And I'll kind of shorten it and mold it into the kind of the format that I have, and they'll post them up there. And so it's great to see the community kind of work together in that way.
And it's cool. Cam, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I mean, I was just about to say, I don't know how many times where I've had like a session planned out, and I'm just like, I want to throw some weird at these guys, just like a little small thing. I'll scroll through Jason's Instagram, and I'll pick out like a couple of them, and then just make something totally off the wall bizarre. And there's several NPCs in my home campaign that are like notorious because of Jason's Instagram page. So, but to kind of segue back into the main question, right now in 2020, there is so much information out there. I mean, honestly, I think the basic core rules are for free. That D&D Wizards of the Coast offers for free, and then literally just hop on Instagram, maybe not make a Twitter account. Start with Instagram, but maybe Pinterest next, because there is just so much good content out there. And the cooler thing, in my opinion, is that, especially the Instagram community, is that if you got questions, message Jason. He's got dang near 50,000 followers. Message, Rollnat20, who's got also close to 30. Message Lady Tiefling, who's a brilliant, she makes all these wonderful loot tables, and they're going to message you back, and they're going to help you out and give you like real authentic feedback. So the world's your oyster.
That's really good.
Don't go to Twitter. That's like Mad Max world right there.
Yeah, that's rough. Talk about the Wild West, right? That is.
Although
I sold all my shares of Twitter by the time you finished that comment. After hours trading.
Go ahead, Brianna.
Oh, I did want to mention, I personally haven't taken advantage of this, though I really wish I would have started doing it sooner. Wizards of the Coast right now, with everything going on, is making a ton of their content available for free for download. So that's just kind of if you guys didn't know that, anyone watching, definitely take advantage of it. I think it's a really great thing that they're doing to help the community right now with everything that's going on.
I think they have a daily giveaway right now too. One of my players put in our Discord server that they have. I think it's mostly Adventure League, different things like that, but definitely something to check out. I think it's a way that they're trying to add value during a challenging season.
This is the second time we've brought this up, but for the audience out there who doesn't know, Adventures League is literally like a pickup game. It's like organized play for D&D. So a really easy way to find a group if you don't know anybody in your town that's ever played D&D. Literally look up game stores that have Adventures League, and you're going to get a big list that pops up.
I know Warhorn is a good site to help you find some games. If you do Reddit, the Reddit looking for group LFG is great as well to find groups. I didn't have this in the notes, but it's something that has popped in my mind real quick. And it's mostly inspired by Brianna's Instagram account. Is inspiration, like how do you get inspiration to create content? To me, when I was first starting out, I ran modules, but it always felt daunting to be inspired to create my own content or be even spontaneous. And so Brianna, I highlight your account specifically, and Logan, you do a lot of this too, actually. Brianna, through the your artwork and your photography on your website or your Instagram is just amazing. And Logan is doing quite a bit with creating some story seeds and creating some weapons and some content. And he's bringing in parts of the coalition and feeding it through his website too. But maybe if one of the two of you or both of you would just talk just a couple minutes about what inspires you in creating content for your games.
Ooh, that's a good question. Look, I feel like you're about to say something. Do you want to go first?
Oh, no, I was about to say ladies first.
Oh, man, put me on the spot.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, how polite. Well, first of all, thank you for the compliment. I really appreciate that. And I feel like that's a question that actually gets asked of me super frequently through like Instagram DMs, is where the inspiration and the creativity comes from. And I think that I had to first get over kind of a little mental hurdle I put in place of thinking that I'm not a traditional artist. I can't draw, I can't paint. So I, for some reason, thought that's where like I could never go into like an art category. Once my mindset changed, and I cannot remember who I heard say this, but it was an idea that there is no such thing as creatives and not creatives. Anyone's a creative. It may just be that first step you have to take in finding what inspires you personally. For me, I pull a lot of inspiration from a lot of different places. Music's a really big thing for me. If I have the right song, I can get into a very easy mindset of taking certain pictures or building content for a game. And then I also pull some inspiration or borrow inspiration from like video games that I play, comics that I read. Heck, everyone else's social media accounts that's on this chat right now. You all have inspired me in some way. I think it's just getting motivated to start is kind of where a lot of people get stuck.
Yeah, I mean, to kind of piggyback off of, what you just said, it's when I first started my own writing, it kind of just happened and I had that inspiration. Now it takes a little bit more time. I have to kind of set the mood for myself, find the right music, find the right, if I'm creating content for my Instagram account, maybe I'm sifting through the monster manual, on a random day for something I'm writing and I find something that pops up. Maybe I'm looking on Pinterest and I see a picture. Maybe I, saw I think a couple of times I've looked at something Jason's done and I've said, okay, this, but what if? And I've kind of taken it and I've molded it to fit what, I've wanted to do, kind of like Cameron said as well, how it fits your world, your campaign. A lot of it is up here. It's in your head. At least for me, and kind of getting myself to sit down and do it is really, I'm trying to be more structured with it. But I think getting over that hurdle of like, I'm not a creative. Everybody's a creative. Everybody is. I can't draw, and I did a little doodle of a weapon that I wanted. That I gave one of my players one day, and the next day I think it was bonus action. Did the art for it and turned it into an actual thing for one of his posts, and I'm like, hey, I paved the way for that. That's really cool. I think it was bonus action. It might have been someone else.
He's a solid dude.
Yeah. But when in doubt, look for inspiration from the D&D community. That's kind of my biggest thing is if I can't sit down and it's not coming to me right away, I look at other people that I know and what they're doing, and try to get inspiration that way as well.
Yeah. And, there's one thing to be said about taking inspiration and putting it into action. And I think this is something that always inspired me. Like Brianna said, there's no such thing as non-creatives and creatives. I think you have to start. And one quote that I read that really just helped me, you started having no graphic design experience, having no photography, no nothing. I can barely formulate sentences sometimes. Is the man who moves a mountain starts by carrying small stones. Just do something. Do one post a day of something you've created on PowerPoint. Anything. Just start somewhere. That's it.
Good.
Yeah, once you get those creative juices flowing, some of the other the players and DMs of Fabled and other Ukador things, they see that. Like, Solo, how do you do this? I don't know. I just do it. Like, I didn't know how to make dungeon tiles, so I figured it out because I needed it for this. So, like, D&D specifically just it in its own core, it just motivates and inspires you to create. That's especially 5th edition. Like 5th edition just makes you, ooh, like what's this? And then if you surround yourself by other healthy individuals, other healthy creatives, even if you're not looking at their Instagram or their page, just them as human beings and having conversations with them. Something like Logan and I have had several conversations about a few of his characters, and like something he says like, ooh, and then I write it, and I'm all excited about a character I'm going to play in his thing, and he's all excited about a character he's going to play in my thing, and we're bouncing ideas off each other, and like realizing that, I'm going to let him slide on this, but like, are you going to let me slide? So we're kind of going back and forth. We're not really doing that. But
the answer is no. Always no.
Always no. But
never give Solo any footing.
Oh my God. It doesn't matter. Like, I'm always listening. But there's so many things, and that even if like there's so many, it's so funny because like I DM, several shows, and I've DM'd other things where people are like, "Well, I'm not an actor and I'm not an improver." I'm like, "Are you a D&D player?" Like, "Yes, yes, you are. You are an actor. You are an improver because you will go in there and you'll make up some conversation with a pretend person in a shop. You're like, oh wait, you just acted. Good job. You were really good." And I've actually found that D&D players specifically, not all of them, but a lot of them are actually better role players and actors than actors or improvers are. It's a funny, funny thing that I've done this interesting social experiment over the past 2 years that D&D players are this melting pot of creativity. Even if they don't feel like they could ever DM, that's just self-confidence. Like, go on, do it. You know the game, you play the game. You're like, there's always been a moment for every player that's been like, man, why does my DM do this? Or why did he do this? Or why did he choose to do this? Like, even just questioning that just a little bit, that's enough creative juices to tip the scale, and then you can go out and do it yourself. But yeah.
This idea of inspiration.
To tip my hat,
oh, go ahead.
Say real quick to tip my hat to Chris. For people that are nervous about ever dungeon mastering, one thing that Chris Solo does, and if you watch any episode of him dungeon mastering, is you can throw something bizarre at him that might not even be in the rule book, and he'll say, "Sure," and then it turns out to be something so cool. So you don't have to know every single rule.
What was your response to that? What was your response to that when I said, "Sure, go ahead"?
I was like, it just blew my mind.
Yeah.
It's incredible. It always creates some sort of cool story or some cool outcome. Don't worry about knowing all the rules.
And if it becomes too difficult or whatever, I just make things harder. It's fine.
And that's how Scrag came to run a cheese shop. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'll say this about inspiration. I think when you're passionate about something, you can't help but draw inspiration from everything. So I just started, I think it was in December, maybe. Jason, you can help me remember when this campaign I'm running now started, but it's my first time DMing for an ongoing campaign. Before this, I had just done one-shots. And I'm so immersed and excited about lore and storytelling and world building and character development that this past weekend, I watched that Disney documentary on Imagineering.
Yeah.
I swear every single episode I was watching it and I thought, that's so good. I need to think about that for my game. Like, what does that? So for an example, there's one point where one of the Imagineers talks about the 4 levels of detail of a Disney theme park. There's the aerial view, the street view, looking at the building, and then interacting with the textures of an element. And I guess Walt Disney cared about every single level of detail. So I asked myself, what do my cities look like from an aerial view? And what story does that tell? Then when my players are in a street and they enter the city, what do they see, right? And like, what story does that tell? When my players are out front a new store, how do I illustrate that and describe that in a way that tells a good story? And then even down to, and my DM who runs my game does a really good job of describing like textures and granularity and like fabrics of something, all the way down to the like very, minute level. But I say all this to say, like, if you're passionate about your game and you love it and you're excited about storytelling and your lore and your world building, you won't be able to like, you're over here and you think, oh, how does that relate to my game? And you're over here and honestly, John Cleese talks a lot about this as far as creativity goes. He says creativity comes from taking 2 seemingly unrelated things and bringing them together and saying, how do those things create something new and incarnate something new? And I think that's what we need to be doing, for inspiration when we're, building our worlds or creating our characters.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's how my game hook started. I would just have an idea and I'd write them down and turn into a big list. And it just kept going. Like what Cameron was saying, like it's that first stone you have to carry for the mountain, and now it's turned into this mountain of stuff. And there's just inspiration literally everywhere. And I live in a particularly beautiful part of the country, I think, and there's just crazy stuff all over the place. And there's a good number of the hooks that I've written and even scenes I've described to my own players that are based on things I've experienced here. Can I show you guys something kind of weird?
I wouldn't lead off with that, but okay.
How weird? How weird?
Phrasing. So you guys see this this big sheet here? So it's like 5 or 6 categories with like from here to here is all one category, and there's another one above it and over, and there's each one has like 10 to 15 things, and it's people's locations, motivations, what else is on there, situations, items, things like that. And when I get stuck for a game hook, I'll go to that list and just pick like 3 random ones from that list and figure out how to turn them into something. And the hooks from the last 2 days, today and yesterday, came from this just list of stuff where I was like, all right, well, how do I, like you said, Anthony, take these 2 different things and kind of push them together and create fission, as it were. And so, yeah, it's just keep your eyes open and be ready. Inspiration's everywhere.
Yeah, I think the other thing too about inspiration is I don't care how creative you are as an individual, you're never as good as you are when you're with somebody else. So Jason has become like my guy, and I'd never run a session ever.
That's terrifying what you're about to say. Go ahead.
Well, I never run a game without chatting with you first, because I'm like, hey, dude, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? Like, do you see any, gaps in that? Or like, how could that be a little bit more vibrant? Or I'm really stuck. Like, I said this, and now how do I bring these 2 things together? And it's always better when you work with somebody else.
Absolutely.
And I think there's like an ego and a pride that can threaten that. You think, well, this is my world and this is my world building, and so it should be my ideas, and I don't want to let anybody else encroach on that. But man, do your own players a favor and get like a world building buddy system. Buddy up when you're world building, and just have somebody that you run through your plots with, right? And it will, I guarantee it'll be so much better.
Yeah, absolutely. We're better together, and don't ever think that you're doing anything by yourself. You never are. You have literally, a millennia of popular culture sitting inside your brain that you're pulling things off of, whether you acknowledge it or not, or realize it or not. So you're never doing anything alone. I mean, there's nothing new under the sun, right? So you might as well do it with another thinking person who can give you that English on the ball to help you to figure out something new.
To edify what Anthony said too, leave your ego at the door as a dungeon master, because the best thing you can do is ask for feedback from your players. And because you might have a whole design that, to be quite frank, they don't care about. But by asking your players, you can adjust that and manipulate it towards things that they like and how to captivate them. And it just makes for a much more healthy table, and it opens up a whole new level of communication with your players.
Yeah, I asked my players a couple weeks ago what they thought about that session, and one of the guys said, it feels like we have no midterm goal. And I said, are you freaking kidding me? Like, this is obviously your midterm goal. How dare you say something like that? But then I realized, oh, that's not clear to you. And so I need in the next session to make that abundantly clear that this is your next step in, like, solving your bigger goal. And so yes, communication with your party, debriefing with them, asking them I always ask after every session, give me like the rundown on your player or your character. What is your character thinking? What are their new goals? How are they feeling about the party? That way I can be ready in the next session to, drop those little pieces in there that I get from them.
So it sounds like after everything we've maybe... Go ahead, Cameron.
I just was going to say, what was the main question for this one?
No, so yeah, this is
I don't
really
know,
good.
ducks.
Inspiration.
Yeah, it really was. What advice would you give somebody who's interested in starting out now? And I think even though we've shared our experiences. Well, I'm looking at it we've shared a lot of our personal experiences running games, playing in games, where we're getting inspiration from. And that I dovetailed that question into the inspiration piece, and I'd asked Brianna and Logan to talk about that. But I think everybody, all of you at one point in time has said, work with somebody else. And I think so much of maybe the tension that I'm even now just seeing in the questions that we had talked about, that we can't be around other people unless you're Anthony. You're special in Florida, but otherwise you can't. And Cameron, sorry, but you can't really be around other people right now. And yet here you guys have all shared unique ways and how you are bouncing ideas off of other people, working with other people. And if anything, it's shown that maybe even though we can't sit around somebody's kitchen table like we normally would, we are still creating these shared experiences at the table and away from the table in really, really meaningful ways. So that was I thought that was really good. That's just a really good pivot point to move to maybe where I wanted to end at tonight. So ending on a positive note, Anthony, I'm going to pitch this question to you. What self-care tactics have you employed to stay mentally and emotionally healthy during this time? And you could even beyond just being a player or a DM, just what have you done personally to kind of stay safe in that space?
Sure.
Does this
Yeah.
presume that Anthony is mentally healthy?
That's a good.
Yeah, okay.
That's a right.
I just wanted. Okay.
Asking for a friend. Interestingly, I think a lot of us have talked about this already tonight, but I think maybe this serves as a good summary for some of our conversation. I think one of the things that we need to be attentive to is being creative and keeping our life as typical as it used to be. And so taking a minute to reflect and say, what were the rhythms in my life? What was I doing? What were the rhythms that I was engaging in? And then saying, okay, well, if I can't go to a coffee shop, what can I do? And so, for me personally, I got down my French press off the cabinet, got the dust off the top, and every morning, well, not every morning, but I try to do a French press and have like a little thing of creamer in it, and I bring the tea next to my desk, and and then I refill my coffee cup, just like maybe if I were at a coffee shop or something. But trying to like preserve that old normal, but just bring it into this new space, I think is really important. I think something that's really interesting to me is how more active I am now. So now that I used to create an excuse. I don't want to go to the gym because it's so far and I have to pack my bag and I don't want to shower there. But now there is no gym. The only excuse is, am I going to do a push-up right there? And so now I'm actually working out far more than I am before, and I feel better. Movement is good for your body. Cameron could say a lot about this, but I think staying active, participating in some sort of exercise is important. I think community, we've talked a lot about this. And Jason said we've actually talked more, we've talked more in this season than we ever have before. Like me, Brianna, and Jason got on House Party. And we threw down on some trivia, and did we do Pictionary or something? I don't know, but we were trying to have fun and just preserve community, right? Just stay connected to people any way that you can and have fun. I think something that's really important that I'm trying to take more seriously now more than ever is this idea of stillness. So if you're religious, entering into prayer and just trying to calm yourself. If you're not religious, practicing meditation, learning how to like center yourself and, practice breathing techniques. There's a really phenomenal app that I got. Actually, Josh, my co-host for my podcast, got it for me for Christmas or my birthday last year. It's the Balance app. I don't know if it's on Android, but it's on iPhone. But I'll just do 3-minute meditations, and they walk you through how to like keep yourself calm and pay attention to breathing. And then the last thing I would say too is just create something. I think right now is a season where we can feel out of control, but to create is a way that you can express yourself and control something. So yeah, Brianna and Logan both said that there's no difference between somebody that's creative or not. And Logan said everybody is creative. And I think that's true. I think innate inside of us as human beings, we were made to create. I think we're created to create. I think that's an important part of who we are and our identity. And I think tapping into that now is more important maybe than ever. So I think those are some of my ideas on staying healthy in this season, being disconnected and out of your typical rhythms.
And that's one. I'll pitch it to the rest of the group. What do you guys got?
I want to hear from Cameron. Go ahead, Logan. Though.
Yeah, Cameron. I know Cameron first. I think he's got a little bit more knowledge on stuff like this. Considering
wow, y'all wait to put me on the spot here.
Hey, am I going to blow up your spot? It's not like you work in the health industry or anything.
Yeah, I think Anthony really hit it on the head when he said you have to create. Even if you're not an artist, if you're not a writer, if you're not a singer, if you're not a carpenter, like screw it. Go to Home Depot and buy some wood and just make something. Like even if it looks like crap, like make a little shelf. Look up some YouTube videos. Do what you got to do. Kai and I were so bored. My girlfriend and I were so bored that we literally went to Home Depot and built like a headboard and painted our whole bedroom. And we've neither of us are painters. Neither of us I used to do construction back in college, but I haven't really touched a tool in several years. But we made something together that was awesome. We carved our name into it, and it looks beautiful. So just getting out and realizing that you can still be happy in these awful times, these awful circumstances. And if anything, it's just take a moment to not only accept it, but in a strange way appreciate it. And that way, whenever things go back to normal, you're going to be in such a better, more appreciative. You're going to have so much gratitude just in your everyday life. But I think Anthony really did a good job at touching on all those points.
Yeah, I think for me, the one thing that I do every day now that I didn't, now I'm on week 5 of our stay-at-home order here in Philadelphia. The one thing I try to do every day is keep a routine. From when I was working, wake up at a decent time, walk the dog, take a shower, make some coffee. Now I've even built in time. Have a set time from like 9 to about 10 in the morning. I spend an hour every day and try to read. It gets, for me, it's that kind of creative piece. It helps get the juices flowing in my head. And then, I either work on stuff for school, I answer emails, or, I write and, take some brain breaks, go out and walk the dog, or, go walk to the park right by my house and walk around a bit. Just kind of soak in the sun as much as I can. But I think for everybody, my biggest advice would be whatever routine you had before all of this started, try your best to continue it, because once we get out of this, it's a when, not an if. When we get out of this, if you're not sticking to those routines, you're gonna have a hard time getting back into the flow. So that staying as close to your routines now would be my best advice.
I definitely agree with you on that, Logan. I know you and I had a conversation recently actually talking about having to keep a routine and how that benefits a lot of people. I mean, for the most part, I'm really fortunate in the fact that my line of work is considered essential right now. So I'm able to keep a routine somewhat regular to where it was before everything started happening. Personally, one thing that really benefits me is making sure that I am keeping in contact with other people. I can't speak for everyone, but I know when I get into kind of lulls or, I'll be honest, depressive states, I isolate at that time. And noticing when I start doing that, it is very difficult to get out of that rut after a while. So if you find yourself retreating, reach out to someone, even if it's not someone that, you would talk with normally. Heck, send me an Instagram message. I don't mind. I'm totally willing to talk. But almost every single person in this conversation, I've messaged at one point or another. Even if it's just something as simple as, "Hi, I'm bored. What are you doing right now?" Or going into other discussions and house parties and whatnot. So that's personally what I've been doing.
Yeah, I like that Logan said keep your routines and not abandon those. Be disciplined. I would also say there's something in our psychology that when we need to change something, it's helpful when there's like a bigger movement to go alongside of it. So if there's ever a moment where so for me, for example, getting back into working out, I'm trying to use this as an example to get back into that, and so I can say, oh, I'm stuck at home. This is a great time for me to build this discipline back up again. And there's something, in your mind, it makes it easier to build a new habit when there's a massive change already in your life. Like if for example, you move somewhere and you're in a new city or something, and you say, I'm going to find a new gym, and this is going to be a part of what I do. This is similar. You're in a new rhythm, forced into a new rhythm. So not only keeping old ones that you liked, but I think this is a great time to try to develop new rhythms that you wanted to have all along.
Well, this has been wonderful. Again, I want to say thanks to all the panelists for being here. Extra love to D&D Coalition, the D&D Coalition, for connecting me with everybody. Chris Solo and Fable 42 for hosting this. ladies and gentlemen, the state of the game is perhaps stronger than it's ever been. And I hope that we were able to illuminate that for everybody tonight. So I would highly recommend anybody watching this, hit up everybody's Instagram. If you only message any one of us, I'm sure we're here to reach out and just connect and say hi. And with that, we'll say good night. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye, guys.
See you guys.
Bye.
Better together. Be safe.